at around 11:30 in the morning on the 14th of August of 2018, in the middle of a violent thunderstorm. A 200-meter section of a motorway bridge in the Italian city of Genoa stopped existing. One of the concrete towers holding it up came apart, and everything hanging from that tower went down 45 meters into a riverbed, a highway yard, and an industrial street below. Cars and trucks that had been driving in the rain a second earlier fell with it, 43 people dead. What makes this collapse different from almost any other is that it was not a surprise. The bridge had been studied, measured, argued about, and repaired for decades. Engineers had written reports. Papers had been published. A professor had gone on the record years earlier, calling it a failure of design. And still, at the moment it came down, traffic was flowing across it at full speed. In the next 50 minutes, you are going to understand what was strange about the way this bridge was built, why its own designer knew from the start that he had a weakness, what was actually corroding inside those concrete cables, how a country rebuilt the whole thing in less than 2 years, and what the criminal courts of Italy are still trying to decide about the people who ran it. It starts with the bridge itself, because the design explains the failure. The Polcevera viaduct, known to everyone as the Morandi Bridge, opened in 1966. It was designed by Riccardo Morandi, an Italian engineer with an international reputation and a real fascination with what stressed concrete could do, and this bridge was his showcase. A normal cable-stayed bridge holds is decked with steel cables running from a tower down to the roadway. Steel cables are flexible, visible, and crucially, you can inspect them and replace them. Morandi did something different. A wrapped stays in concrete. The tension was carried by steel tendons inside, and around them a cast concrete shell. The stress situated would stay in compression. His free zoning was not crazy. Concrete around steel protects from iron water, which is what makes steel rust. In theory, encasing the cables meant a bridge that would need almost no maintenance for a very long time. In theory. In practice, it created a structure with a hidden nervous system. Once the concrete is poured around those tendons, the tendons are invisible. You cannot look at them. You cannot easily measure them. If water finds a path through a crack in that shell, it hashes the steel and begins eating it atom, how inside and the outside of the steel looks exactly the same as the day it was built. The bridge could be losing strength for years while showing you a clean concrete surface. That is a detail that makes this even harder to accept. Morandi knew in the 1970s, inspecting a very similar bridge he had designed in Venezuela over Lake Maracaibo, he found chemical attack on the concrete and corrosion of the tendons, and he wrote about the need for maintenance and protection. The weakness of the concept was documented by the man who invented it, decades before Genoa, and the location made everything worse. The bridge crosses an industrial valley in a port city in salty coastal air above a steel plant that operated for decades with heavy traffic below and, over the years, far more heavy traffic above than anyone in 1967 had imagined. Salt and pollution, attack reinforced concrete. That was the environment this experimental design had to survive in. It helps to be concrete about what corrosion actually does inside there, because it is not really housed on a surface. Those tendons are still under enormous permanent tension, holding the deck up the way a taut rope holds a load. When water and chloride hit them, the steel loses cross-section, wire by wire, and every wire that goes transfers its share to the wire still intact. The remaining steel is now more stressed than it was designed to be, which makes it fail sooner, which loads the next on is harder. It is a slow avalanche happening inside a concrete tube at a speed nobody outside can see, and it does not announce itself with a sag or a crack in the road. The deck can look perfectly level right up to the last minute. Worse, this is exactly the kind of damage that ordinary inspection does not find. You can walk that bridge, drive it, photograph it, tap the concrete, and learn very little about the state of the steel sealage inside. Jetting real numbers requires specialized instruments, or opening the concrete, which itself risks damaging what you are trying to measure. So the question of how much steel was left inside the Pier 9 was never a simple observation. It was an estimate produced by experts, argued over by other experts, while traffic kept crossing overhead at 100 kilometers per hour. So the bridge aged badly, and everybody could see it aging. Repairs started early. In the 1990s, one of the towers, the one known as Pier 11, had external steel cables attached around the stays, essentially a rescue system bolted on to help carry the load that the original concrete stays were no longer trusted to carry alone. And that's intense again. 20 years before the collapse, one of the three towers had already been given a corset because its cables were suspect. The tower that fell in 2018 was Pier 9. It had not received that treatment. In the years before the collapse, studies were commissioned on exactly this question. Investigations looked at how much of the steel inside the stays of Pier 9 had been lost to corrosion, and the numbers discussed in expert reports were not small percentages. Plans existed to strengthen it, tenders were prepared, work was scheduled to begin. The bridge fell first. No, the collapse itself. It was raining hard that morning, a strong August storm over Genoa. At around 11:36, the stays on the southern side of Pier 9 failed. Tosgo, the tower has nothing balancing it, and the whole assembly, tower and deck together, comes down as one piece. About 210 meters of the viaduct disappeared in seconds. There is one image from the morning that went around the world, and it explains the margin between living and dying better than any diagram. A green delivery truck stopped a few meters from the edge, at the exact point where the road ends in open air. The driver had seen the deck ahead of him disappear and bracket. Photographs taken minutes later show that truck alone at the lip of the void, the rest of the lane simply gone. Other drivers seconds earlier on the same lane had no warning at all. When a bridge fails, it does not fail slowly for the people on it. Below was not empty ground. Below were streets, were railway lines, a river channel. Rescue crews worked for days in a mountain of concrete slabs the size of rooms, cutting into voids where cars might be. 43 people were killed. Hundreds of residents in the buildings directly under the bridge were evacuated permanently because those apartments were now standing under an unstable ruin and would eventually be demolished. Genoa, a city with almost no flat ground, whose sides pinched between mountains and the sea, which is why that viaduct existed in the first place. There was nowhere else to put a motorway, except in the air, over the rooftops. So when the bridge came down, it did not just cut a road, it cut the city in half, and it cut one of the main freight routes between the port of Genoa, the industrial north of Italy, and the French border. Trucks that used to cross the valley in 2 minutes were sent on detours of an overthrown streets never designed for them, a port that lives on moving containers suddenly had a notch in its main artery. Neighborhood underneath Certosa paid the highest price after the death. Hundreds of people were evacuated from apartment blocks that stood directly beneath the remaining spans, told to take what they could carry, and most of them never moved back. Those buildings were later demolished so the ruin above could be brought down safely. Soon, some families are there for generations in homes bought before the bridge was ever built over their heads. They lost neighbors, then they lost the street, then they lost the buildings themselves. Italy went into a kind of national argument that lasted years. And the argument was not only about engineering, it was about who was responsible for a public road that a private company operated for profit. The motorway was hung under concession by a company whose income came from tolls. and whose obligation was to maintain the structure. Investigators, prosecutors, and parliamentary inquiries dig into inspection records, into reports that flag deterioration, into decisions about what to fix and when, and into the incentives of a system where the money for maintenance comes out of the same pocket as the profit. At debate is still in court. A criminal trial with dozens of defendants, including former executives of the operator and of the inspection bodies, has been running for years, with charges around manslaughter and safety failures. The concession itself was renegotiated, control of the motorway operator changed hands, and Italy rewrote how it supervises bridges and tunnels, creating a national monitoring system for tens of thousands of structures. A collapse of 43 people rewrote a country's inspection law. There is also a wider question that Genoa forced the world to asking, because Morandi did not build only one of these. He designed structures with the same concrete causes they concept in other countries. The most famous is the General Rafael Urdaneta Bridge over Lake Maracaibo in Venezuela, opened in 1962, the one where Morandi himself documented corrosion attacking the tendons in the 70s. Another is a viaduct in Libya, Wadi al-Kuf, a long-span crossing a deep valley. After the Genoa collapse, engineers looked again at every one of these structures with a different kind of attention, and the Libyan bridge in particular went through a program of assessment and strengthening. One collapse in Italy turned into inspection campaigns on 3 continents, because the same idea had been spotted. There is a pattern worth noticing in engineering disaster. A design flaw is rarely a single building. It is a family of buildings, sharing an idea that seemed elegant at the time, waiting to be re-evaluated by an accident somewhere else in the world. And then there is the part of the story that is genuinely astonishing, and that engineers around the world still talk about what happened next. Italy decided to rebuild, and to rebuild fast. The old remains were demolished, including a controlled explosive demolition of the 2 surviving towers in June of 2019, with thousands of residents evacuated and water sprayed in curtains to hold down the dust from a structure that contained asbestos. Then, construction of the viaduct began on the same alignment designed by the architect Renzo Piano, who is from Genoa, and built by a consortium of Italian companies working in shifts around the clock. The new bridge is deliberately the opposite of the old one. It is a continuous steel deck on simply slim concrete piers, with no stays at all. There is nothing hidden inside the concrete. It is designed to be inspected. There are systems for monitoring robots that travel under the deck to check and clean it, sensors watching how it behaves. Where Morandi tried to build something that would not need maintenance. The new bridge is built around the assumption that it will absolutely need maintenance, and that maintenance must be easy. It opened in August of 2020, almost exactly 2 years after the collapse. 2 years to demolish a ruin above a living neighborhood and build a kilometer of new motorway viaduct in a country with a reputation for slow public works. That speed became its own political story. So, what's the actual engineering lesson here? The one that matters beyond Italy. The first is about inspectability. A structure you cannot examine is a structure you are trusting on faith. Morandi's stays were sealed for protection, and that same seal made it impossible to see the damage building up inside. Modern practice pushes hard the other way, making the critical elements visibly, replaceable, testable. If your safety depends on something, you need to be able to look at it. The second is about redundancy in that design. The stays of a single tower held that section of bridge, lost enough of them, and there is no second path for the load to travel. Good modern design tries to ensure that the failure of one element transfers load somewhere else instead of taking the whole structure down. The word engineers robustness, not being unbreakable, but failing gracefully. The third is the uncomfortable one, and it is not about concrete at all. This bridge was studied for decades. The problem was known, described, measured, and scheduled for repair. What failed was not ability to detect the defect. What failed was the shame between knowing and acting, the reports, the budgets, the priorities, the contracts, the arguments about who pays. Infrastructure rarely collapses because nobody understood it. It collapses because understanding each and fixing each are two different organizations on two different millennia with two different budgets. There is a photograph that circulated after the disaster. The surviving stub of the viaduct cut clean in the air, with the city visible through the gap where the bridge used to be. It is worth remembering that from 1967 to 2018, millions of people crossed there without thinking about it for a second, because that is what infrastructure is supposed to feel like: invisibly, boring, safe. The whole discipline of engineering exists to keep it boring. Every time it stops being boring, someone pays for it and the rules get rewritten in their name. And that is the strange that this channel exists to talk about. Almost every safety rule protecting you right now, in the building you are sitting in, on the road you drove today, was written after something failed and someone counted the cost. We inherited those rules for free. The people who paid for them did not. If you want to understand why things fall and what will change afterwards, subscribe to Collapse Engineered. Every collapse is a lesson right in concrete and steel, and we read them one at a time.